I'm Jono Buchanan, and in this video what we're going to do is to apply high-pass filtering to a couple of sounds within a dance music track. This is a live loops project which I've imported into Logic, and what we're going to do is to just begin to see when we start playing around with tone in a couple of ways that I think you'll recognise. So firstly, let's just have a listen to the track in question. So what we've got is this section from bar 6 up to bar 14, where we've got this kind of floaty intro, and then things get a little bit more serious at bar 14 for 8 bars. And what I want to do is to slightly accentuate that difference by using a high pass filter trick. Now what filters do is they allow only a certain group of frequencies to pass or to be heard. So a low pass filter lets through bass frequencies and gets rid of high frequency content. A band pass filter gets rid of bass content and treble content and focuses on frequencies in the middle. And a high pass filter lets through high frequency content and it gets rid of low frequency content. And it's the one that sounds most unusual in a sense, because what we're doing when we're high pass filtering a sound is we're getting rid of what we call the fundamental frequency, the actual note that was originally played by the instrument in question. So what we get is this kind of ghostly, slightly disembodied sound, which is really great if what you want to do is to create this kind of ramp where we sort of have this increasingly thin sound leading back into a sort of full frequency, nice, big, deep, rich sound. It's the sort of thing that Daft Punk do an awful lot. So what we're going to do is we're going to see how we can use a high pass filter trick on a kick drum to start with, just to see what sorts of effect we can produce. So what I'm going to do is just run this section again, but I'm going to take the basses out for now, and we're going to just listen to this 8-bar section, and at the moment no filtering is happening on this kick drum. Okay, so we can hear all of the bass in the kick, and we can hear the kind of slightly toppier high end of it as well. There's a little bit of snap in it, which we're hearing as well. Now, what I have done is to put Logic's Autofilter onto this track already. And when I open up the Autofilter, what I can see straight away is that I've got the filter section up here in the top left-hand corner. And what I can do is to choose the type of filter I want to work with. And the high pass filter is this one. It's showing me that I'm sloping out or getting rid of low frequency content, but keeping the volume of high frequency content the same. So what we've got here is the cutoff dial. Now, because the dial is all the way across to the left-hand side, you can almost imagine this being bass content. As we sort of come up towards high frequency content, scrolling the cutoff dial around to the right-hand side, what we're doing is we're omitting or getting rid of all of the bass frequency content that exists between the extreme bottom end, the super low bass frequencies, and increasingly up to high frequency content as well. So if I play that sound and we sweep the cutoff dial through, what we'll find is that we get this slightly disembodied sound as we roll out the low end of the sound. And of course, as we sweep it back down round, we get all that bass back. So what we've got a chance to do here is to say, right, well, we want our kick drum to have all of this bass, but what we want it to slowly do is to feel less and less rich and full. And then maybe what we're going to do is to pull it down at the end so that just at the bar line, we get all of that bass back. So what we're going to need to do is to automate this so that we can actually draw a line for this cutoff frequency, so that we get this kind of disembodied sound, and then just in time for the bar line, we get all of that bass back. So let's do that next. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up Logic's Latch mode, which is one of the modes which allows me to record automation data, and I'm going to reopen the Autofilter interface. Now what I'm going to do is just to press play and just write a little bit of cutoff frequency information. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to introduce this as a parameter on the automation track behind it. What I've done is to press A to open up the automation lanes, and the moment I press play on my Logic project and then touch the filter dial, I'll start to see the line being created that I'm talking about. Okay, so I've recorded lots of little individual nodes there. I'm going to come back to read mode, and we'll see straight away, if I zoom in a little bit, that we'll see that little bit of data that I just created. Now actually, I don't really need any of this data, but what I've done now by going into Latch mode is I've introduced this parameter to Logic, and I can see that I've got the cutoff parameter currently selected here, and the point where my playhead is, it's showing me the amount of cutoff, 0% in this particular case. Now what I'm going to do is just to create a second point here and literally just drag out to the right hand side to erase that line, but I've still got the parameter selected. So now what I'm able to do is to say, right, well actually I want to create a line that's a little bit more considered. I want it to play at full low frequency for the first 4 bars, and what I want it to do is to recover in time for this downbeat, but in the meantime what I want it to do is to go up and up and up and up until eventually it gets to about 65%, by which time it will sound very thin before it then recovers in time for the downbeat of bar 14. Okay, so we can hear that we've got this kind of increasingly sort of thin, tappy sound. It becomes less and less impressive, and then we get all of the kind of excitement of that sound coming back in. Now, at the moment, we're hearing the kick drum by itself, but what if we were to apply exactly the same technique to the bass line as well? Again, what I've done here on this bass sound is to use the Autofilter. Again, I've got the high pass filter set up, and what I'm going to do this time is to open up automation and to show you how you can find that parameter without having to draw it in using Latch mode. What I can do is to drop down to where it says volume, come into the Autofilter, which is here, and go and find the parameter in question, which was cutoff. So it's here. So if you'd rather not use Latch mode and you just want to be able to go and find the parameter of your choice, go and find the plugin that it relates to, and then go through the parameters to go and find the one that you want to use. So here is cutoff, and again, I'm going to see that here, and again, to start with, it's at 0%. So what I'm going to do is to mimic that same shape that I had here. I'm going to create just a point to start with at about bar 10. I'm then going to make sure that it's going to recover in time for that last beat. And then what I'm going to do is again have this sort of high frequency rise happen through that particular part. And this time what we're going to do is to hear the whole track at the same time. And we should hear that high frequency sort of riser, this high pass filter effect applied to both those sounds together. Now these sorts of automation changes come in all different shapes and sizes. What I've done is to draw lines that get all the way to the bar line and then just fall off a cliff ready to get back down into bar 14. But if you wanted to have something that just kind of teased out for a longer period of time, we could adjust that highest moment so that it happens a little bit earlier in the bar so we can actually hear it sort of fall back down into the bar line instead. Let's try that next. So if I move these 2 points back to, let's say, I don't know, let's say beat 2 of this bar. So what's going to happen is it's going to reach this point and we're going to imagine that it's just going to continue up and up and up, and then it falls down through this ramp back down to bar 14 in a slightly different way. Let's just play that from here. And that's working really nicely. So what we've got here is this opportunity to create a tonal variation in the sound, and what we're doing at the moment is automating from a sort of flat line where effectively the high pass filter isn't doing anything at all, and then suddenly it's engaged and it produces this change. Now what we're going to actually do in dance music production is to wait for a moment like the one that happens at bar 14 and to use high pass filters engaged in a small way before finally allowing all of the bass through. I'll show you what I mean. Let's take this synth bass part and think about it again. At the moment, what I've got is all of the bass that's happening all the way through here before the high pass filter begins to work its magic. And then at bar 14, because it comes all the way back down to 0 again, we get all of that bass back. But what if I was to set the sort of bass amount of this frequency a little bit higher than 0%. In other words, what we're doing is we're shaving off the low frequency content all the way through that section, not just at the point that the automation starts, but effectively the bass just isn't quite as full and rich. And as a result, when that happens at bar 14, it's going to be even more impactful. Let's have a listen. Now, I've probably slightly overdone that, but what I could do, of course, would just be to sort of slightly split the difference, let through a few more bass frequencies, but still keep this slightly disembodied bass sound for a bit longer. And then eventually when the bass arrives, we're really going to sort of feel the rush of that. So within this video, what we've done is we've applied high pass filtering to a couple of bass heavy parts, deliberately getting rid of some of that bass content so that when we arrive in the new section of our track, we get even more weight and that kind of slightly exciting arrival of all that additional bass content at the point where the track's really starting to pick up.